All right, here we are at another episode of Flipping Houses for Rookies. Good morning, Peter.
Morning, Bill. Hello, everyone.
Is it AM or PM?
Well,
I said,
you can ask the question: what does AM and PM actually mean?
yeah. Well, I've actually looked that up, and I could tell you, but I don't want to do it right now.
Okay, everyone else
When
look
I
it up.
when I set up the recording for this morning on Facebook and LinkedIn and all that, I pushed the wrong button and put it at PM instead of AM, and we're a little bit late because I had to fix it.
Ew.
But anyways, here we are, episode number 392.
Jeez.
And here is the title of today's episode. Are you ready for creative real estate deal strategy opportunities in 2024? And here's the description. Buckle up, my creative real estate rock stars. The market might be shifting, but that doesn't mean opportunity is beyond your reach. Whether you're a seasoned real estate entrepreneur or just starting out, this episode is packed with valuable insights and actionable tips to help you unlock hidden gems and skyrocket your success. Forget the predictable path. We are venturing past that and into lands most don't even know exist until we tell them. Think about it. What if you could use video games to tour your houses? Or use a smartphone to do deals anywhere in the country? Sounds like sci-fi, right? Not in today's world. But it's not all about the cool tech. The market is shifting. Don't be left squinting at the future or left in the dust. Join us as we journey down the future highway of how houses will be bought and sold. So if you're ready to think of real estate in a whole new way, listen in now. Okay, so I definitely have changed my operating basis on my notes, and I noticed, or it's been brought to my attention, I should say, that last couple of podcasts I don't do my housekeeping in the beginning.
You what?
I don't do the housekeeping in the beginning. I skip right over it.
I remember you doing it many times.
Yeah, well, that's because we did it with 400 shows. So, anyways, let's just get through that. So, thank you for all your support, listening to us wherever you're listening to us, or watching us wherever you're watching us. We record this show at 9:30ish a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday mornings, and we live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. If you would like to join the podcast, aka ask questions, go to any one of those platforms, type in Flipping Houses for Rookies, and you will find us. And wherever that platform allows you to type, like in the comment section or wherever it is, you can ask your question there. And as long as it's pertaining to the podcast, I will answer the question while we're recording the podcast, and we will mention you on the podcast. If it's not about the podcast, or if you have some question for Peter or I, or something other than outside the podcast subject, you can go do one of two things. You go to WhatsApp Messenger. What is it?
Well, it's WhatsApp, but what's our group?
WhatsApp Messenger. And it's lost my train of thought. Oh my God.
Let's talk real estate.
Let's talk real estate. Thank you.
Oh, I remember.
A senior moment there. Let's talk real estate. So go to WhatsApp Messenger and go to Let's Talk Real Estate. There's like I don't know 100 150 people in there. It's kind of like a mastermind group. Some days the chat blows up and there's people talking about deals, and then it may not do anything for a week. And then lastly, if you have a private question for us and you don't want to be in the group, then you go to Flipping Houses for Rookies. Top right hand side is a support link, and you can go up to that support link, send me a support ticket, and I will make sure, if the question's for me, I will answer. If it's Peter, I'll make sure he gets it so he can answer it, and we will help you however we can. So I talk about the markets changing, Peter.
Yeah, that caught my attention.
Right.
So what's changing?
So it's not like 2008 where it's a major shift.
Hmm.
2008, what happened was, I mean, you could read about it online, and if you understand the book "Creature from Jekyll Island," you'll completely understand it. How our monetary system is completely made up and it's fake, and the government doesn't control the money and all that kind of stuff. It's all notes, and it's what it's backed by and all that crazy stuff, right? So basically, the in the beginning of that book, the author speaks of, and I don't remember his name right now, but the author speaks of how back in primitive days, there was no such thing as banks.
Mm.
There was a blacksmith in town,
Yeah.
and that blacksmith had a safe. And so, what happened by just organic uh, living, people that had valuables would come to the blacksmith and say, "Could you put this in your safe?"
Jewels, crowns, gold, silver.
Whatever it may be, whatever they thought was valuable, right?
Yeah.
Now you have to realize back then, fires were a big thing because people heated their house with fire, right?
Yeah.
So that was also, and I don't know if it was so much from getting robbed; it was more just be safe, because it was a
Yeah.
metal container that maybe wouldn't allow things to burn, right?
Sure.
So, anyways, what happened was is that blacksmith or those blacksmiths or however the story goes realized that only less than 10% of the people would come in and take their stuff out.
Yeah.
So if you had 100 items in there, only 10 people a day would come and go to take their stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
So excuse me. So what happened was, yuck. Show you my snotty nose. So what happened was it became very notable, and that's how the banking industry runs right now.
Well, they would give paper notes to cover what was in the safe if people wanted to just use a piece of paper representing the money in the or the valuables in the safe, right? So
Right, right,
that's how the money kind of represented the stuff, the
right,
physical, real stuff. I
right,
swear to God, there's real stuff in a safe. Please take this piece of paper note. You can go get some stuff from the blacksmith, something like that.
right.
But
So
because only 10% of it ever got used, what did they think?
so what happened was is that became the banking system. So what happened was is prior to the early 1900s, I think 1908 or 1910, and I think it came into legislation like 1912 or something like that.
Hmm.
There's a group of guys, Childresses and all the big bankers that scammed us, which is what the book is about. Um, Banks were lending more than the 10%. In other words, instead of lending 90% of the money, they were lending 95% and only having a 5% reserve.
Hmm.
And they found that those banks went bankrupt.
Oh,
So this group came together, and their intention was to standardize the banking industry so that there wasn't a bunch of wild west people out there, right? That were just lending too much money and they were willing to take the risk and da 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 da. So they kind of set the precedence by keeping it 10%.
hmm.
Anyways, I tell you this whole long, boring story because in 2008, that's what they did. They adjusted the 10% because the banking industry was less than the 10%. Because in the years before that, you could fog a mirror and get a loan. They were
Right.
just printing too much money and they were not keeping it correctly secure. Bottom line is I probably bored the hell out of everybody. Bottom line is
No, that Bill, that's crazy stuff. People never think of that. And I heard weren't they at one point lending 10 times what they actually had?
yeah,
Since people only asked for 10% of what they actually had. So, well, I can loan 10 times that because no one's going to ask for it.
right,
And if they do, we're screwed. And
right.
that's where you get screwed. You go ask for your money. You go, sorry, we lent it.
So what happened in 2008 was they tightened up that that mark. So let's say that they were lending, they were down to 8% reserve.
Hmm.
So what the banks did, and which by the way, this all comes from Sweden. Sweden is the one that lends us the most amount of money. they lend us money for, which is what we call our deficit. Definition of a deficit is when we borrow money outside of our own country and we owe another country money. So Sweden is the biggest one. So Sweden will lend us money, but they will tell us, oh, we'll lend you the money if you pass these laws.
Sure.
And they're often liberal laws, which I'm not saying are good or bad, but they're often that way. So this was one of those things. So they told them that they had to fix. They lent them money, and they told them they had to fix the amount of money in reserves. So what happened is the banks in 4 or 5 weeks time just drew in all the credit lines. So if you had a $10,000 credit line, it was now $300 above what you owed. So if you owed $2,700, you had a $3,000 credit line, and they drew in all of the credit lines. That was the home equity line of credits, HELOCs, that was credit cards, that was bank loans, it was everything. And on top of that, if you had a mortgage that was approved and being funded, it was not being funded because the bank's credit lines were not available.
Yep.
That was the crash in 2008. So when we hear of a crash and we use the word crash, we think of that, like the Depression in 1991, 2008, those kind of crashes, right? Mm-hmm. So I bring all this up and waste your time this morning with this because I tell you that the market is not shifting like that. The market it's a subtle shift. It's more like, the old story of the frog that gets boiled to death because he's in the pot of water and he's swimming around and he doesn't realize that the water is getting warmer and warmer and warmer to a point where it just boils him.
Yeah.
Right, and he dies. That's kind of like where we're at right now.
Yep.
So I thought what I would want to talk about today is just some hardcore, real things that happen. Right now, I don't want to get off on a tangent on this, but I personally believe that, and you and I talked about that. We talked about this on our coaching call on Monday night, and I don't want to get into a whole conversation with this because we'll probably do podcasts on it. But education to me is observation.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about the other night, education is more or less, what gets people to do real estate is when they are familiar with it and they feel comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, nobody that I know of has defined the different buckets or how simple creative real estate really is. And it seems like a complex subject, right? So we're working on that. Like there's only 6 buckets, right? So one bucket is the actual real estate, the actual property itself. Another bucket is the money. The lending, the loans, and how much money's owed and how much it's worth and all that. Another bucket is the seller's desired results or the desired emotional results. Another bucket, the fourth bucket is the buyer's emotional desired results. And then the fifth bucket is, the legal and all the paperwork. And then the 6th bucket is the facilitator that puts it all together, whether it's somebody like us or it's a realtor or something like that. Mm-hmm. And we'll go into that more. But the point is once you get familiar with each one of those buckets, you can then be more calm about it. And what happens is after some time, you're so familiar with it, you don't have, like when you're not familiar with something, right, you speculate.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're not familiar with your car, if you're not familiar with cars, and it does something, this happens with my wife. Something happens with the car, and she's not familiar with cars, and I was in the car business all my life, so I'm very familiar with cars. I took them apart, I put them back together. I understand them, right?
Yep.
So what happens is when you're familiar with something, you're so familiar with it, you see things that others wouldn't see because you're not speculating. You're just very familiar with it. Like me, I've been working on cars since I've been 9 years old, and I'm 60. I haven't worked on them in the last 10 years, but I mean, I had the big Snap-on toolbox. I owned a gas station for 27 years. I worked on cars, and I'm not saying I was good or bad or anything like that, but I was very familiar with cars. So cars
Hmm.
don't bother me, So when I hear something, it's like, that's nothing.
Yeah.
Where you might hear it or my wife might hear it, you're
Mm.
like, you're speculating, oh my God, I'm going to break down on the highway and I'm going to be stranded,
Yep.
right?
You don't
So,
know. You don't know. What it is. So it could be big. My refrigerator's leaking inside. I went online. I found out it's the drainage. It's not defrosting. There's a little ice in the tube. I got to take some things apart. I can unplug it for 2 days, but I don't want to ruin my food. But I don't need a new refrigerator.
right.
Otherwise, geez, is it broken now? Do I need a brand new one? You start thinking the worst because you don't know.
And that brings up another point because when you go online, you feel like you're learning about something, and sometimes the information is not exactly
Mm.
the information might be good, but it may not be matched up with what you're looking for.
Yeah, I had to find the Frigidaire
Yeah.
for Yeah, exactly. But it's better than just wondering.
So what I have found is that most rookies speculate because here's what happens when you're not familiar with something, it keeps you from observing it correctly.
Hmm.
You can't confront it, right? So if you haven't talked to a seller or you haven't tried to make a deal, then deal structuring becomes the thing to do, the speculation,
Ah,
right? So you come up with all these scenarios of how it could be and should be and wouldn't be that are all imaginary because
mhm.
you haven't done it.
Right. And no matter what you think, it doesn't matter, is what the seller thinks, right?
Right. Right. So I bring all this up again to not bore you. I mean, we're 15 minutes in, and I don't want to get out of this rabbit hole I went down. But the point is that guys like myself that do a lot of business and completely are familiar with it and are not worried about what's going to happen because you're familiar with all of it and you're confident in it because you're familiar with it, so you're confident in it, right? Um, you see things in a different light. You see things and speculate things that others don't see and speculate. It's kind of like being in an airplane and you're on the runway and what you can see.
Yeah.
And then you take off and next thing you know you're at 30,000 feet. It's a different view, right? When you're on the
Yeah.
runway, you can only see the runway
Hmm.
and what's around the runway. But when you're at 30,000 feet, you can see the whole city,
That's right.
right? It's like the difference. So I'm not bragging because of that. I'm just saying that there are a lot of people like me. It's not just me. That when you're like that. So here is one of the things that I think or I have noticed that is happening, which is why I tell you it's an opportunity or a strategy in 2024. Now, I've never put a date on my podcast before. Like, what is it like in 2024?
Hmm.
I like my content to be evergreen, but this is very apropos that I put the year 2024 because we're in 2024 and it's very articulate to the topic we're going to talk about.
Hmm.
So here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about in COVID, which was 2020 to 2022. So we'll say it was a 2-year stint.
Yep.
The first year in 2020 was the lockdown.
Hmm.
So at that point, what happened is we all know what happened. We all got put in our houses and we were told not to go anywhere. And if we went anywhere, it was like, you're going to die.
No, worse, you're going to kill someone.
Yeah, that too. Right.
Yeah. It's bad enough that you might be sick, but the guilt of you're going to kill your parents.
Right. And I got to tell you that just as a side note, I had COVID pneumonia and I was in ICU, which is intensive care, for 2 weeks, and didn't think I was coming home. Okay,
Yep.
and I will tell you that it's 2024, and I've just recently um, went to the doctor, which I never do, and realized what COVID actually did to me.
Really?
And I had residual. I had long COVID, which I had for a year and a half and I had no idea what it was doing to me physically. I thought it was just, I'm turning 60, so I'm getting old. No, what the vaccine did to me, what the disease did to me, or the virus or whatever you call it did to me, and it's taken me 4 months to get through it, get my body to get rid of it, and I actually in the last week or so was thinking that I feel better than before I got sick, and it's
Oh,
taken me 2 years to figure that out.
jeez.
Anyways, so I get the whole thing. I don't know why I went off on that tangent, but I get the whole thing. Here's my point: is that real estate changed. It dipped first because we didn't know how to deal with how do you buy a house if you can't go in and look at it.
Sure.
You can't send an inspector because nobody allows anybody in their house, because if somebody came in the house, they were going to die.
That's right.
Right? So that lasted for about 6 or 8 months. And then us investors got pretty clever, and we started using the out of area owner list, which is mostly people that have second houses. So I think what happened was, for a couple of years, at least a year and a half, I think what we were doing is we were, at least a year anyways, we were buying houses that people didn't live in. And let me change that. The seller didn't live in. They had
Right.
renters or they had
Right.
somebody else in there, but it wasn't their primary residence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happened was that kind of shrunk up. So so what happened is I know this as a statistic because I've spoken to a few lawyer friends of mine, because we're from Connecticut and it's a judicial state. So I realized that about 40% of the transactions that happened to date, and it started during COVID, are done without a realtor. So, it was back then it was like 30-35%, but it's up to 40% now. So what happened is that people kept wanting to buy and sell houses, and they were forced to do something other than call the realtor, because the realtor couldn't go in the house, right? And they
Yeah.
couldn't sell it because the only thing they had was MLS, and they had their, at the time, archaic system that wouldn't allow them to go to do anything electronically. We were doing deals with FaceTime. We were doing deals with, people walking around the house with FaceTime, or we would do a Zoom call with a laptop and people would show us houses, with the video cameras.
Yeah.
We were doing electronic signatures. We were doing Zoom calls, and we were using DocuSign and Notary Cam for notarized, online notaries, and we were doing deals that way. Because 40% of the people were not going to the realtor, it became this thing that there's a shortage of houses, because most people that want to sell a house would go to a realtor. Realtor would get a listing contract, and they would put it on the MLS, the multiple listing service, which is the realtor's only way of selling. There's some freak incidences where they'll actually know a buyer looking for something, but and the only job the realtor has is to find you a buyer. So the point is this: it looks like it's a scarcity of houses now. So what has been now for about a year, maybe a little bit longer, give or take, it looks like there's a shortage of houses.
Mhm.
So if you listen to anybody that doesn't observe or speculates, like I was talking about earlier, because they're not in the business and they don't understand, and they make up these scenarios because they're not actually doing it, or they're not doing any business and they make up excuses. They come up with was a shortage of houses. And then I've even gone as far as watching some people that I even know making videos uh, that are saying that, way back since the early 50s, population growth, and we haven't had enough construction. And it's all hockey puck. Basically, what's happened is the communication between the buyer and the seller became more direct. This is no different than Airbnb taking out the hotel business. This is no different than Uber taking out the taxi business. They put buyers and sellers together and didn't have a third party that was there manipulating, taking fees, and controlling the market. On the heels of that, in October of 2023, NAR, which is the National Association of Realtors, got sued for racketeering because it was found out that their fee structure is not right, even though they've been doing it for 75 years. Their fee structure, they got sued for, I think, $1.78 billion. That lawsuit is still going. They've been investigated by the last three administrations, which is Biden, Trump, and Obama, which is 15 years. All three of them, the National Trade Association has found that they are keeping the market up. They own a company. They have a subsidiary company of them is called Value.com, or Value whatever, and they own most of the websites, or have a large portion of websites. Like maybe not Zillow, but like Realtor.com and Trulia and Redfin. So what they've been doing is they've been holding the comps higher, because when they hold the comps higher, they get a bigger commission. So all of this has been going on, which has never happened before. And I say that the industry is changing.
Oh yeah.
Right. So what's happening is, like Berkshire Hathaway is owned by
Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett. Guys like that. These are the companies that they sued. They got big, deep pockets. And I can tell you right now, just from reading, I don't know these guys, but just from reading about guys like these guys, once they make their money, they don't like to give it back. And so the fact that they have this $1.78 billion lawsuit, of course they'll appeal it, whether they have to pay it or not. They don't like that liability. And what you will find is the market is going to change, because they're going to change how commissions are structured, and they aren't going to want to have that liability of being sued again. So that means in 2024, it's changing. Something's going to change, because even if they don't lose it, which, by the way, that lawsuit was done, I think, in Missouri or Mississippi or something like that. It was a class action suit with 250,000 homeowners, and they won. They claim there's another 150,000 homeowners, and they claim that number is going to go from 1.78 billion to up to 5 billion, because now that they've won, they're going to go get more class action suit and get more people that will get into the lawsuit. On top of that, I told you the National Trade Commission has done an investigation about this whole value thing, about keeping the values up, right? That lawsuit is expected to start in 2024. So the National Association of Realtors is in kind of deep doo-doo. So whether that's true or not, it doesn't matter. I do know that the way they pay commissions is going to change.
Wasn't there also a problem that they took, there were seller commissions for the selling agent and buyer's commissions for the buying agents? It's like double dipping, which has been like forever, but somebody decided like that isn't right.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, in other countries outside of the United States, they don't do it that way. The buyer pays the commissions. In the United States, the seller does, and that was what the gripe was. So it's taken me a half an hour to kind of get us to square zero, but here are my thoughts. All that's changing. On top of that, what happened is because of COVID, there's more and more of us guys, meaning creative real estate investors or investors in general, that popped up, and we started doing texting and all that kind of stuff. Right? So that's all dead right now. I'm telling you, that's dead. We do it. It's good. We used to get between 30 and 40% responses on our text, and now we're lucky if we get 20. It's no different than the bandit signs, and they get overused and they stop working. It's no different than the yellow letters. They worked and then it got overused and they're not working. So my company, which is Creative REI Reply, which I have 3 other partners with, it's not just my company, but I'm a huge part of that company. I'm the one that initiated it all. And that company, coming in another week or two, is releasing the only software in the US that not only texts, but it has an AI that responds to your text and makes appointments for you. We're now excuse me, we're going to release in another week or so what we call voice drop, because my question that I keep asking my tech guys is okay, so if we send out 1,000 texts and only 200 people respond, what happened to the other 800 people? Well, we now have voice activated, so it's my voice. I record 1.5 minutes of my voice, and it simulates. It's that deep fake stuff, right? It simulates my voice, and those 800 other people get a voice message from me saying, "Hey, Peter, that house you have on Thornton Street, do you want to sell it? Because I have 82 buyers that want to buy it. Right.
Mm.
And it leaves a message. And then a minute or two later, we text, and we have found that the texting has gone way up. Right after that, another week or so after that, we have other software that will start, will be able to start doing the actual outbound calls. So we'll actually talk to the seller, almost as if it will do the opening call and a little bit more. Get all the questions, get you qualified, make an appointment by phone. You'll know that it's an AI, so you're not, so the person talking to you. So all that innovation, all that technology is really good. So that's why I say it's cool, all this tech that we have, but it doesn't replace human on human, because at the end of the day, that's how it's going to land. You know, when you throw a cat off of a 4-story building or 3-story building, which I did when I was a kid, because I wanted to make sure that datum is, does the cat really land on his 2 feet, on his 4 feet? So I tested it, and I pushed the cat off, and he landed on his 4 feet, and he never came back.
Yeah.
The point is if you push the cat off the 4-story building, he'll land on all 4 feet, right? So we want to make sure that we're going to land on all 4 feet, because at the end of the day, all 4 feet means you're talking to another human and you're doing a deal. So that led me to think, now this is all kind of like, kind of Bill Planet thought, and I'm sorry if I bored you with my thought process, but it made me realize that what is the new deal structure? What's going to happen with our users when all of this stuff? I mean, we're practically doing the deal for you. I mean, in Creative REI Reply, we're putting leads in the account for you every day. We're texting them for you every day. The AI is answering those texts for you and trying to make an appointment. If they don't text you back, we're going to have with your voice, or you can use somebody else's voice if you want, but we're going to actually have phone calls, outbound phone calls going out that will ask you if you want to sell your house, and text us if you do. And then right after that, if you do want to do that, you'll have a phone conversation with AI to pre-qualify whether or not you qualify and make an appointment for a closing call. I think I'm doing everything for you. When you get on the call, we have very specific scripts that are almost 100% close ratio, right? I mean, when I say 100%, I mean that if you use the scripts and the person is motivated, then they will close, right? So there's no more Q&A on scripts. I have the scripts nailed. And we have a calculator that we use so that you know which deal that you can and can't do based on a red, yellow, green light scenario. Once you pick the deal and you go over the numbers with the customer, you click on a button and our robot pre-populates all the documents for you, and you send them over and they sign them electronically. Now, Peter, I would like to think that I'm everybody's partner right now. I'm doing everything for you. I'm massaging you, and I'm putting you in the bathtub, and I'm massaging you, and I'm doing the whole. I'm putting you in the bathtub, but it's like there's this. It's like, what else do you want? You want me to do the deals for you and then hand them over to you? I mean, I'm damn close to that, right?
Yeah.
So it made me think, okay, so if all this stuff is working and we took care of all this tech stuff, what is the rookie going to run into? And here's what I came up with.
Mm-hmm.
What you're going to run into is those houses that were bought during COVID. Those houses that when we had a shortage for 2 years and the house was worth 200 and somebody offered 250. And they bought it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So what happens to that deal now? How do we buy a house that's worth, at the time, 200, that's really worth 175, and they want 250 for it?
Mm-hmm.
How do we handle that? So is that a fair question?
Yeah, because I mean, look at any houses on the market and just look at you'll find if you go down the page on Zillow or something, they'll show you stats and they'll show you the graph, right? And they'll show you 2 years ago, the graph was like X, and now it's like X.7 in 2 years. Like, what the hell? The average increase in houses is 3% a year. So this is definitely a bubble, and unless it pops, it's a lot. I mean, even we have some new apartments in my hometown, 1,200 square feet, $3,700 rent for new apartments, and the people are freaking out in my town. Like, that's affordable. So it's just the numbers are just you just can't live with those numbers. You can't buy it. What do you do? So what's your answer?
So it's funny, is it livable? Because what they track is they track the expenses, not the income. It's the old story, like I hear people all the time talking about the current administration, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's just going back to what we were talking about before, like what do they confront and what don't they confront, right? So if you're familiar with the way an average American lives, and you aren't a billionaire, right? And you
Yeah.
know what it's like when you only have $100 to go to the grocery store and you need 150, so you have to take shit out of the carriage, or you only put $20 worth of gas in your car when it takes a $50 fill up, and you got to go 3 times a week as you get money because you're a waitress and that's how you get cash.
Yeah.
Right? Then you don't speculate, right? So that's what the current administration does, is they don't live that way. So they speculate that they think they know what we want when they don't.
Yeah. Of course, inflation isn't bothering them because they're loaded.
Well, they're on the other end of inflation. They make money from it.
Ooh.
So let's take a $300,000 house.
Uh-huh.
Let's not do that. Let's say the seller's asking $300,000, but the house is worth $275,000.
Okay.
Now, it's common knowledge that the way we would do business is we would have 1 or 2 profit centers. They are equity, which is buy low, sell high, or cash flow, which means every month you can make money. And if you watch any of the videos I have on YouTube or on Flipping Houses for Rookies or Facebook or wherever you go, you'll notice that we talk about money now, money monthly, money later, right?
Yeah.
And we talk about, and if you don't have equity, we create equity, right? So if you're a consistent listener to this podcast, the last 6 or 8 podcasts, Peter suggested we do more real things about, instead of theory all the time and talking about all that, we've been doing deal structuring.
Yep.
But in this particular case, the house is $25,000 over its market value because it's worth $275,000, and they're asking $300,000. The reason why they're asking $300,000 is because they paid $300,000, right?
Yep.
Now, here's an interesting fact. So the thing is back then, inflation didn't hit in, so interest went up from 4% to 5%. I don't know what's the matter with my throat today. Interest was at 5%, so I did a payment at 5%, taking in consideration that I didn't write it down. I think I did taxes were, with the taxes and the insurance. Yeah, I don't know what I did for taxes. Oh, wait a minute. Here it is. Taxes were $1,981 a year, $1,981 a year, and insurance was $1,781.
Okay.
Okay, and it gave us a payment of $1,981.09, so $1,981. Right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The taxes are $1,981 a year. The payment is $1,650.
Okay. 1650.
Okay.
That's what the seller's paying.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now what we do is we then take that number, right, and we figure that number at 8%, right? Hang on one second. I'm going to blow my nose. Okay, sorry about that. So here's what happens. Because interest has gone up because we have an anomaly in our market right now, which is the 2024 change I'm talking about, because interest is going up, we're not going to make money off of the interest. We're going to make money off of the situation. Because, see, we're selling the house, we're not renting it. So we're
Right.
selling the person the house and saying, oh, by the way, you can pay us rent until you get a mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll give you up to 3 years to do that. Right.
Sure.
So basically, we're saying to the seller, we're going to go find that person. The buyer, we're going to say, hey, have you ever heard of renting a house today that you can own tomorrow?
I haven't heard you say it like that. That's kind of cool. Rent a house today that you can own tomorrow. Really, never heard you say that, but that's what it is.
So basically, here's what happens. So I'm kind of drawing this out. So because the seller is paying 5% on their mortgage, the mortgage is $1,650,
Mm-hmm.
right?
But in today's market, if it's
Today's market at
8%,
8%, it would be more money.
mm-hmm.
I think I'm doing these numbers wrong. So I'm going to start over again. The at 5%, the mortgage is 1905.
I thought it was 16.
Yeah, I read the wrong number.
Okay,
So
so
at $300,000,
mm-hmm.
it's 19. Actually, at $275,000 because they put 25 grand down. The PITI is 1905.
Okay,
PITI is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance.
yeah,
At 5%. At 8%, it's 2446.
yeah,
Okay. So here's the interesting thing. Your seller has no money to take out of the house. They owe $25,000 more than what the house is worth.
so they have no profit or equity.
So if they were to sell a $300,000 house on their own, it's about 10% for closing costs. That's 30 grand,
Mm.
right? So you take the 30 grand plus the 25 grand that they're upside down. In other words, it's worth 275 and they owe 300.
Mm.
That means it's a $45,000 swing, right? In other
Mm-hmm.
words, just to break even, they need 45 grand.
Right.
If they use a realtor, it's 15% closing cost. So now that's $45,000, right?
Sure.
Plus the 25,000, that's 70 grand, isn't it?
Yeah, not very enticing to sell the house, is it?
So they're stuck with it. Absolutely, blatantly, point blank stuck. What do they do with this house?
Yeah, and they can't just go buy another one because that's 8% interest and rent this one. Can't do that either.
Right. So all the unusual solutions arrive.
Mm.
Like you said, become an accidental landlord and this and that, and I'll put my sister's kid in there and all the stuff, because I know this because these are the stories we're getting now.
Yeah.
It's taken a while to hear this stuff, but they're now in our conversations every day, every week. You hear something,
Yeah, they can't even go rent a place
right?
because the rent is $2,000 for an apartment.
Right. So here's what happens. We come along and say, we will buy the house or get the house purchased for you.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we tell them, and if you do that, you're going to make a lot of money. Now they're talking about either going from a $45,000 or a $70,000 loss to what do you mean I could make money?
Yeah.
It's a different perspective. Reason why we could do that is because, first of all, we have $522 a month in rent profit, because the difference between the 1905 and the 244.6 is 522.
Right.
Okay. So first thing we're going to give them is $541 a month in profit, which comes down to $6,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
For 3 years, it's $18,000.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing we're going to do is because the tenant buyer is paying a lease, that means in my world, regardless of what the internet says and what the millennials think, is you pay rent for the usage of the property. There is not a principal reduction for the seller, for the buyer when they pay their rent. It does not reduce the price of the house unless they pay above and beyond the rent.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Rent does not mean principal reduction. It means I pay for the use of the property. And you're paying for the use of the property until you can get a favorable mortgage and buy out the option, because they have a lease with an option to purchase. Right? So, like I said, have you ever heard of renting a house today that you can buy tomorrow or own tomorrow? That's what this means.
Yep.
But for the seller, what happens is they pay rent, and every time the seller pays their mortgage, they pay interest and they pay principal. So they have a principal reduction. And that principal reduction means more equity. So later on, when they pay off the mortgage, they gain that money in their payoff.
Yep.
Right? So on this particular house, I did all the math on this. We have a calculator for this, by the way. And that calculator, if you want to use this calculator to come up with these numbers, I put that link. You get free use of it for a while inside of the chat. So it's in the description of this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
There's a free use of this calculator, so you could do this math with me if you want, right? So on this house, you're going to get a 45. You're going to get a $377 a month average principal pay down, which means that it's $4,500 a year. So the seller, if they keep the house and do this deal with us and let us go find a buyer for them and let the buyer pay the closing costs for them, right? And I'm going to tell you how to do that in a minute. These are the numbers. So the first thing is they're going to get cash flow of $6,000 a year because of the cash flow. Now they're getting $4,500 a year in principal pay down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 3 years, they're getting $13,584. Okay, that's a lot of money. The next thing that happens is am I being too significant here?
No.
The next thing that's going to happen is because you don't live in the property, you're allowed to get depreciation. Depreciation is marked over 27 and a half years, which means it's 3.64% a year. In this particular case, it's $2,293 a year. So it's $2,300 a year. For 3 years, they're going to get $6,800. So that means every year they're going to save $2,293, the taxes on $2,293. So they're going to save that on their tax bill.
Yep.
The next thing they're going to get is we're going to put in the lease, when we do our lease with an option with our buyer, we're going to put into the lease a 0.25% increase every month, which is 0.25%. And you and I talked about this a couple podcasts ago. I used to do it after the first year. I'm not doing that anymore. What I do now is I put it on day one, 0.25%. And if they cash me out within the first year, I'll refund them that money, or I'll show it on their purchase and sales agreement as seller concession.
Mm-hmm.
In this particular case, it's a lot of money. It's $9,000 a year. For 3 years, it's $27,000.
Sure.
Now, this all adds up to a profit for the seller of $67,000 the first year. For 3 years, it's $111,000. So that means at the end of the first year, they're actually selling the house for $367,000. If you add all these numbers up, they're not selling it for $300,000. So they're not losing $45,000 to $70,000. They're actually making $67,000.
It's a huge difference,
right? If you do a 3-year lease, which is what I suggest these days, is you do a minimum of a 3-year lease. That means the seller is going to make $111,000. or they're selling the house for $411,000, not $300,000.
Mm-hmm.
If you did this for 5 years, which is what sellers realize, a person in this position will be like, well, why would I ever sell it? They do 5 years, they're making $155,000, and they're actually selling the house for $455,000. If they did it for 10 years, in other words, leased it for 10 years, that's $265,000 they're making. They're selling the house for $565,000, almost double what they owe on it. It's double it at $275,000 that it's worth.
Yep.
And here's the thing: they're doing it without being a landlord, and you're getting paid to do the transaction. Now, in this particular case, because the house is worth $275,000 and you're selling for $300,000, you're not going to be able to get a lot of money. So you'll probably be able to sell it for $310,000.
Mm-hmm.
Normally we tack 5% to 10% on top of it, right? So 300,000 times 5% is 15,000. You could try that, but I suggest you do 3,099. The way you're going to sell the house is by advertising it house for sale, no bank qualifying, and that no bank qualifying is going to know the fact that it's a $310,000 house that's worth $275,000, because the people that want to buy a house without a bank will skim right over that number, and they'll be so curious they'll call you and want to know how it works. Right?
Yeah. Well, one of the things is it's not as big a deal what the cost of the house is, because you're not paying it in cash. You're paying monthly payments.
Right.
So if you can get in a house with monthly payments and go for a few years, get a mortgage, and you look at the long run, you're still better off than renting, and then maybe someday buying a house or never. The numbers are still better, but it's monthly. If you can afford monthly, I mean, we all buy stuff. Like, how much is the car payment a month? I can't afford that. Does it matter what the car payment is? Yeah. How about the overall cost? Not if you can't make the payment. What's the difference?
Right.
So it's not that big an issue if they can make the payment and
Which
be in
is
the
why,
house.
which is why you've never heard me say it, because I've never said it. I kind of figured it out the other day, which is why I say, have you ever rented a house today that you can own tomorrow?
I like that.
Right? Because that's what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of people that have gone through a divorce. They're resetting their life. They lost their job. They're transferring. There's all different reasons why this happens for sellers and buyers. But the point is that 2 years ago, we get this deal in our inbox, or however we get our deals, and we throw it in the garbage. It'd be a D deal, delete, right? Where nowadays the market has changed because of all the variables that I spent 30 minutes of this podcast telling you about. Because of all those variables, deals like this are way more accepted. We're not the Aborigine, the stranger out in the middle of the woods that has snuck into the city and scaring everybody because of the way we look. It's not that way anymore. We're actually common folk now with these creative deals, because a lot of our sellers have heard of it. And when you present this to people, which the link that's in the description not only gives you the calculator, but it gives you scripts and all that stuff, right? When you present this to people the right way, well, we don't have time to talk about it. Maybe we'll talk about it next week. But you have a deal right now in Florida that's a $3 million deal, right?
Yeah.
The guy's selling the house for $3 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what were you texting me when you got that deal?
I sent it to Bill and I said, what would you do with this one? Because it's a bigger deal than I've ever done, and I'm not familiar with buyers, what buyers are like for something like this. Just territory I haven't been in. And
so what was my answer to you? Let's just do the usual. So we're going to do this deal structure, which we call sandwich lease option transfer, right? A slot deal.
Yeah.
But what is the outcome? I mean, we haven't bought it yet. We haven't closed the deal. We're very close. But the guy is a software guy, made big money, and he thinks a $3 million house, it's vacant. He pays $31,000 a year for taxes, $20,000 for insurance, and has no problem with it sitting there vacant. He lives in a condo not far from
Yeah. It's
there. Right?
crazy. Yeah.
He has enough money or so much money that it doesn't matter to him because it's a different world, right?
Yeah.
The point being is there's another guy like him that will do that.
Mm-hmm.
So we did the usual, and what does the usual do? I mean, this deal, if and when we do it, makes $200,000. One deal that we never even bought, we never sold, we never renovated. All we did was control it with a lease and an option agreement. That's all we did. We controlled the property. We got the seller to sign an option agreement. When we found our buyer, which by the way, we have no risk in it, the $3 million is not, we're not paying the $8,000 or $9,000 a month for the mortgage payment, which he doesn't have. It's free and clear, but we're not paying any of that. We're not paying the $31,000 in taxes and $20,000 in insurance. Because you know why? The realtor does the same thing. They sign a listing agreement. They're not going to pay all those expenses until they find a buyer. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get an option agreement. We're going to sign it with the seller. He's going to keep doing what he's doing now, which is paying, because that's what he's doing now. He's going to keep paying the bills. Right? We're going to go find a buyer. When we find the buyer that has the $200,000 or $150,000 for down payment, or has 100, and we'll finance the other 100, so we get monthly income every month on a house that we don't even own, on a house that's not even in our name, right? And we're gonna set this deal up so that a person that can afford a house like this, that is maybe going through a divorce, or they want to transfer, or they live that way up north and they want to come down south, right? Point is what platform does the buyer go on to look for rent-to-own properties? There isn't one, right? They're going to stumble across it on Zillow or on Redfin or on Realtor.com or Trulia. They're going to, because wherever we advertise it, they're going to stumble upon it. There isn't an app that they can put on their phone and say, I think I want to buy a rent-to-own property in Florida. Let me go see what's available. There is no app. So when they find you, they stick to you like glue, and they do what you want, because there is no place for them to go. And when they find you, they feel like they've hit a gold mine because they found you. Same thing with the seller. Where's the seller going to go with this property? They're going to blow $45,000 to $70,000 on this piece of property. And oh yeah, by the way, this is not speculation. This is 2024. The year 2024 real estate. Where do you think those people are going to go that overpaid for those properties during COVID? They're not going to the realtor. The realtor's already doomed anyways because of all the lawsuits and everything they got. So as soon as that gets out to the public, which you probably haven't heard about it, because what you don't realize is that NAR, National Association of Realtors, is one of the biggest lobbyists in Washington. And when you hear that they lobby that much, that means they have lies they're trying to cover up. And there's big money behind the curtain. The Wizard of Oz is pushing and pulling the levers and piling up the money. So you could think I'm a conspiracy theorist, but this year, it'll all come out. It'll all come out. The CEO of NAR, National Association of Realtors, had to step down in September of 2023 for sexual harassment. So you say what you want about any of that, but if the CEO has those problems, so does the rest of the company. Okay, so birds of a feather flock together, and that's my take on it.
No, they do.
And the point is that you can say whatever you want about me. You could be critical about what I've just told you. You could think that I'm like dramatizing it or blowing it up or hyping it or trying to sell you something because of it. You could think all of that. Bottom line is, you're squinting at the future and going to let dust. You're gonna be stuck in the dust storm. If you don't pay attention to what I'm telling you right now, you're going to miss it, because it's happening right now, and you should be getting deals right now. And if you're not, it's because you're doing something wrong. Because with a deal like this, the only thing you need for this deal is an engaged lead. So what you need to do is you need to automate as much as possible finding engaged leads. Because when you find this person and they are out there that has a house that they owe or are asking 300,000 and it's worth 275,000, they have very few places to go, if any. And you need to be in front of them talking these numbers and telling them these things. And when you do, you don't need skill. You need no skill to do this. You're renting a property. If you've rented a property in the past with a landlord, you're 90% of the way there. You already know how to do this. You're familiar with this. You're familiar with doing this kind of real estate because you've done it in the past. And you'll be competent that you can do it because you're familiar with it. Does this make sense, Peter, or am I just on a soapbox?
Well, I get it because I've been working on it with you. But you're just talking numbers. You're not speculating. Interest rates were 3-4%, maybe 5%. They are 7 and 8 now. You're not making that up. A person buying a house today has to pay that amount. And if he's renting or leasing until he can buy, that's still what the number is going to be. So he has to get used to paying that now because that's the real reality of the thing.
Right.
If you bought a piece of property now to rent it, you'd have to pay the mortgage, all those fees, everything, then add money to that to make a profit.
Right.
That's probably why the stupid apartments in my hometown of Newington are $3,700 for an apartment. That's 1,200 square feet.
I'll tell you why.
Water.
I'll tell you why they're 3,700. I know exactly the reason why. They're brand new, right? They're new construction.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what happened during COVID is a 2x4 that used to be $1 was now $8.
Yeah.
So now they go build a complex, and the whole thing is like that. You know, the toilet used to be 125, is now 400, and it just keeps adding up. And when they get all done, just like what you said, they had all this expenses into it, and that's what they need to do to be able to break even, because they went and got a loan, and for them to be able to pay the loan and make their money, it's got to be $3,700.
Yeah. Of course, the trick is people want to buy it. Not many people can afford that.
Right. This is what we call inflation.
This is we call stupid. Yeah.
Okay, so I hope we made sense today. I know I went a little profound. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Make sure you subscribe to us. Make sure you like us. Make sure you leave us a comment wherever you're watching us or listening to us. If you have any questions, you go to flippinghouses.com. Hit the support ticket on the top right-hand side. I will respond. I used to check them every day, and now it's every couple of days I check them. So be patient with me, but I will definitely get to you. We're doing quite a bit with Creative REI Replay these days, as you are aware. If you want to know anything about that, just go to creativereireplay.com. Actually, if you go down into the description of of this video, you'll get that link there. So check it out. Let us know what you think, and make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like us. And there you go. We're over and out. We will talk to you on the next episode, which is 393, right?
That's what I think.
Yeah, 393. All right, guys. Flourish and prosper. Have a good week. Thanks for listening.